afternoon to have lunch with us.
Thank you very much, Charlie, and thank you, Professor Grimm, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. All right, so Michelle, my first question is, the theme of this week's class is leading people and making change. And as the director of education and workforce development at a major nonprofit organization, I'm sure you see a lot of change happening in education and workforce development. So I'm curious if you can just share with us, what do you think are some of the most significant changes happening today in the United States in the realm of education and workforce?
Sure. Thank you, Charlie. Again, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And let me do a little context setting first. So FHI is a global human development organization that works to improve health and well-being of people throughout the U.S. and around the world. We're located in 60 different countries, including the U.S. and all of our territories. And we also do an increasing amount of work with tribal communities. The department that I'm in is part of the U.S. programs. And in the U.S. programs unit, we work to advance education, health, safety, and workforce development for people of all ages, particularly those who are underserved and from marginalized communities. And we design, deliver, and evaluate services and solutions to the nation's most pressing problems. And so we are a nonprofit organization, but we're pretty large. We feel rather corporate. So some of my remarks will be within that context. So in terms of changes, I think the kind of elephant in the room is COVID and the implications of COVID on all of our lives, but in particular, the implications for COVID in terms of education and workforce development. And I think what has happened is that the pandemic has both exacerbated some problems that have been out there historically, but it's also shined a light on some opportunities in terms of what we know works. So in terms of education, in terms of the work that we do at FHI 360, I will say the portfolio for education is quite broad. U.S. education covers pre-K through K-12, and then kind of going on to working with young people, getting to that college and career readiness, but probably to about age 24. And so in education, really I think what is raised up for us is the importance of whole child development. And so using an educational model that is balanced and focuses on both cognitive development, but also social emotional development as well, which is where we get to whole child development. And the uncertainty, the challenges that COVID has brought on all families, because we work with a lot of young people who are in low income and marginalized communities and have a higher risk for COVID, they're experiencing within the family, it could be sicknesses, unfortunately deaths that are happening, as well as economic challenges. Parents may have lost a job or have had decreased income. There might be food insecurity, there may be homelessness. And so when you add all that trauma together of just trying to navigate being in the learning environment, which of course we all know that we're just getting back to school right now. And some schools are opening in a hybrid model. Some are trying to do face-to-face. Some are opening online. We don't know what the future holds. We anticipate that these changes will also continue to evolve as the school year progresses. Children need a lot of support. Quite frankly, teachers need a lot of support. And so focusing on whole child development is one of the things that we're seeing as very important and unique to this moment in particular. It's been important for a long time, but I think that in terms of the need for this is really fleshed out in terms of this COVID issue. With regard to workforce development, I should say that our focus on workforce is really with youth, young people ages 16 to 24, who for any number of reasons have gotten derailed from kind of that lockstep school to career to college pipeline. They may be suffering homelessness. We've done a lot of work with court-involved youth. They may be parenting teens, something that has happened in their life that has disrupted the traditional progress. And so for these young people, we know that work and learn models are very important. And so a work and learn model is a process where a young person is involved in both education and job skill training simultaneously. This can be in apprenticeships, and there's a growing number of apprenticeships, whether it's just not the manufacturing construction of old, but in law, in business, in government administration, healthcare. Lots of industries are beginning to develop apprenticeship programs, which give employers a wonderful opportunity to get to know young people, and young people a chance to actually develop some skill sets, because it's hard to get a job without a work experience, and it's hard to get work experience without a job. And so you need to have that work and learn environment. The other thing that COVID has really laid bare for young people is a demand for digital literacy. Employers are needing that digital literacy. Young people need to have those skill sets in order to be able to get and maintain a job. And so the work and learn environment combined with the digital literacy is what we're focused on.
Cool. Okay, so in the realm of digital literacy, focus on the whole child and the work and learn model, which you see as some important areas of work for supporting U.S. education systems and workforce development, especially for those people who are left behind right now and are being left behind, or they're the gap is being exacerbated. What do you see as the role of nonprofit organizations, and what does it take for a nonprofit organization to make an impact on issues that are as big and complex as these?
Right. I'll talk about it in two ways. I want to first talk about kind of the traditional community-based organization, because FHI is not that, but I've done a lot of work with and have funded traditional community-based organizations. I think one is really just to kind of know your community and know your market. But I think that particularly for organizations that have an education component to them, I think this focus again on whole child development is actually quite nicely tailored to them. A lot of organizations, community-based organizations, will focus on the social-emotional development and oftentimes offer academic enrichment. Well, there's not necessarily the need to provide the core academic training. That academic enrichment, because kids are trying to learn online, it's going to be, I think, particularly important. And so I think that partnering with schools, I know of organizations that are still being brought into the school in terms of some video time. So kind of rating the content that teachers are doing with having a nonprofit come in and doing some work with young people. As we know that young people cannot learn if they don't feel as if there's an emotional connection with the person they're working with. And nonprofits are very good at developing that kind of connection. It also presumes that the nonprofit has had relationships with the child for a while and has developed those kind of relationships. So I think that nonprofits can play a particularly unique role in trying to help keep kids engaged and connected to school and to learning opportunities. And so that's where they can work. On the workforce development piece, I think it's around the employability skills, which is what a lot of nonprofits have been doing previously, but also adding to that the digital literacy. And there have been a number of organizations that have done that work as well. So I think those are the two areas for traditional community-based organizations. For an organization like FHI 360, it's important to understand that we are a contract organization, meaning about 90% of our funding actually comes from the federal government. So when you think about that and the kind of work that we're responding to in terms of major government programs, I think there are two ways in which FHI can be involved in terms of trying to make a big difference. The first one is in terms of systems improvement. So through our education program, we work a lot with school systems and school districts. And so helping them develop, we do a lot of training and technical assistance to principals, to teachers, to school district personnel. We have a major initiative actually with the Durham Public Schools where we help them develop a social emotional learning hub that they have on their website that's designed for students, teachers, parents, the entire community. And it's designed to help people, help parents, and help teachers support the social emotional development of young children just in everyday life, much less in terms of in education. So scaling that to other districts is the way that we can do that work. In addition, we do a lot of research around the programs we lead and just research on other human development issues that are out there. We've developed an expertise working with justice-involved youth and helping them successfully transition back into society and increase their readiness for education and post-secondary success in careers. And we've done that work in collaboration with an organization called CLASS. CLASS is the Center for Law and Social Policy. And one of the issues that has come out of this research are to identify kind of core issues that have policy implications. So one of the things that we've learned in our work with justice-involved youth, our initiative is called Compass Rose Collaborative, are the collateral consequences for young people who actually have any kind of experience with the justice system. So, for example, we learned that experts have identified over 40,000 collateral consequences at the state and federal level that can limit or prohibit access to employment, occupational licenses, public benefits, housing, voting, education, and other kind of opportunities. And when you think about the fact that 1 in 3 Americans have some sort of criminal record that precludes opportunities to economic mobility and disproportionately impacts traditionally marginalized communities, doing that kind of research helps to highlight the importance of policy issues that need to be worked on. So we can do direct work with systems, expand, strengthen systems. We can also work on those policy and research issues.
Cool. Wow. Thanks for laying all that out. So, for our students who are watching this, if you want to make an impact, if you want to work for a nonprofit organization and make an impact on these issues, you could go in at the community level and work directly with students and support schools and support families. You can go the research angle. You can work on policy. You can work for systems change. There's a lot of on-ramps to trying to make a difference in U.S. education and workforce development. Thank you. Well, we're about halfway through our time for this interview. I want to shift to your perspective on leading people and making change. So my first question in this realm is, as a senior leader, what's your approach to leading people in your organization, and especially when you need to make a major change? How do you lead people towards that change?
Yeah. When I think about leading people, it may be a little unorthodox, but the way that I really think about it is whenever I come into an organization, and I think a lot of this right now, because I've only been with my current organization for a little over 3 months, is to understand where the organization is in terms of its development, its age, its history, where it's trying to go. And for the unit that I'm working with, understand the talent, the expertise that we have, because oftentimes I find that as a leader, you can lead from the front, you can lead within, or you can lead from behind. And I think that what I usually try to figure out is what's the dominant posture that I need to take based on the history of the organization, what it's trying to do, my role, the responsibilities that I have within the organization, and then kind of identify that particular posture, and then use a mix of those things as we go through and solve problems, move the work forward. But I find that people obviously really they're there because I tend to work with organizations that have a strong mission, a social mission, and people are there because of their passion for that mission. And so making sure that people have the opportunity to lead that organization and to operationalize or live out their social mission and their passion for the organization is important. And so I think the way that I can do that the best way in supporting them is to figure out where I can best position myself to support the organization and its mission, what it wants to do, and the team around me, but having that clear vision for what we're trying to go for, and then leading depending upon what I need to be on the side, behind, or up front, given the different circumstances. In terms of making change, I really think about understanding your mission and how you define success. I think it's really important to understand the social needs of your constituencies that you're trying to serve. I think about figuring out where your organization can make the greatest contribution that's aligned with your mission, that often involves some sort of gap analysis, and then building on your existing assets. And so I think if you think about those 4 items, along with how you think about leading, you have an opportunity to make an impact.
Yeah, wow. Cool. I've never heard leadership described as from the front, from the middle, or from behind. I love the humility that's inherent in that. I love your point about figuring out, starting by figuring out the context and the situation that you're in. If you're a new leader in an organization, not showing up with all the answers, but being responsive. I love that. Thank you. So I'd like to see if we can learn from some of your past experiences as well. You've held a number of leadership positions at organizations. Before FHI 360, you were in leadership roles at some major foundations, Venture Philanthropy Partners in DC, and the Walmart Foundation, which was that in DC too, but with work nationally?
Yeah, I was based in DC, but they're based in Bentonville, Arkansas, and I went back and forth.
Okay, cool. So I'm curious, what have you learned from past experiences as a leader that have made you more effective as a leader and change agent today?
Sure. So there's 3 things I want to talk about. One is listen to nonprofit leaders. I think that one thing that I have learned, particularly for working with large, significant organizations, organizations that have a lot of resources, is that all of a sudden people think you're the smartest person they've ever met, the funniest person they've ever met, the wisest person they've ever met. And, you know, I always find that interesting because, like, I would meet them for the first time. They'd say, "You're so smart." I'm thinking, you don't know me. And the minute that I leave this organization, because I probably won't be here forever, you won't know me again. And so I think the first thing to realize is keep your ego in check. I think a lot of people will join organizations, not all, but some will join organizations that are well-heeled, have a lot of resources, large endowments, and they kind of begin to think that this is their money. You're a steward of those resources. And so I think it's really important to listen to nonprofit leaders, and that you want to help them problem solve and become a trusted partner. That's where you can get the best, quite frankly, the best ROI on the return on your assets, and work most effectively with the organizations. I would also say that it's really important, and there's been more writing about this and talk about this, but fund organizational capacity, full stop. There is a direct correlation between how much money an organization is able to bring in and, quite frankly, pay its professional staff, and to design the programs and evaluate the programs and how much money it's getting to support its operations. You cannot do really good programming. You cannot make a significant change if an organization is running on fuels. And so it's important that foundations fund organizational capacity. And I will say for everyone listening and who knows Walmart, Walmart does not fund organizational capacity at a high level. I think its indirect is about 10%. It's been that way since I was there over 10 years ago. But I would work with organizations and figure out how to support them the best way that I could. But I think that in general, we need to do more to support organizational capacity. And of course, that was a lot of the work that I did when I was at VPP. The other item I think is a little more controversial, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, because this is the future of philanthropy I'm talking to, and the future of doing good work. Unless your organization is an operating foundation, resist the temptation to develop your own theory of change. I don't believe it's in the best interest of philanthropy to develop theories of change. The nonprofit organizations who are doing the work, the people who are on the ground in the community, who are solving the problems, who are dealing with things on a day-to-day basis, need to develop the theories of change. As a funder, however, it's very important that you develop a thoughtful research understanding of the root causes of the social issues that you're dealing with, that you understand the contributing factors, and that you evaluate the organization's theory of change. Does it make sense? What's missing? How can you help them build more capacity in doing what they're doing? But I think it's the organization's responsibility to develop the theory of change, and the funder's responsibility to support it. You know, when you think about philanthropy, the role is to help eliminate social problems. So again, unless your organization is an operating foundation, making change through the organizations that you're funding and support is because you believe the grantees have the wherewithal to get the work done. And so I really think it's about kind of like that leading from behind, understanding what you can do as a foundation to be supportive without designing what it has to look like, because organizations are turning themselves into pretzels, trying to meet the expectations of foundations that may or may not support the needs in that local community.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Thank you. So, you know, part of our audience are students who want to be in leadership roles at nonprofits. Some want to work at foundations, you know, jobs like you've had. And some of them are social entrepreneurs, and they're here with us because they've seeded something, they've started something, and they want to scale it up. So, you know, from your perspective, especially, I guess, from your perspective, working at foundations that have helped to fund social entrepreneurs and startup nonprofit efforts, what do you think it takes to be successful as a social entrepreneur, someone who's working in an early stage social enterprise?
So when I was working at Venture Philanthropy Partners, we really were trying to blend the best of private equity investing and philanthropy together and bring out the best of those two approaches. And so when we thought about making investments, we really thought about the first thing is that we were investing in leaders. We were investing in leaders that had a strong vision and a passion. And of course, you need to understand your market. You need to understand your product or services, the value of that product and service in the marketplace, understand your consumers or constituent groups and their needs and their assets and their access to resources. But you want to think about, we look for folks who are visionary leaders. We also look for people who have keen judgment. And what I mean by that is that there are going to be problems, there's going to be mistakes. The question is, how do you solve those problems? How do you learn from those problems? And how do you talk about how you've learned and solved those problems? Getting a sense of one's judgment, because particularly for an early stage investment, you are investing in that leader. There's not necessarily the product or the service that you can invest in. So you have to think about that as an entrepreneur. What I would be understanding is that my investors are going to be looking at me, who I am, and my leadership. Also, are you willing to take risk? And are you willing to kind of put yourself out there and try and learn and continue to develop? Who are the people that you surround yourself with? How do you round out both the skills that you have, the knowledge that you have, and that which you don't have? What are your gaps? What are particular expertise in the marketplace that you need to have? Do you have someone around you who understands the competition or has worked for the competition? You really want to be able to have a kind of a round out team that can understand where you're going and can support you in that effort. And then I think about the existence of a culture around data, collecting data, using data for decision making, understand the power of data, because that's going to help to propel you forward as you make those mistakes and you're collecting data and you're using your keen judgment to learn from that and putting your vision out forward and then leading the organization.
Cool. Okay, so kind of sum it up. Focus on data. Practice good sound judgment, and I guess willingness to admit when you're wrong. Surround yourself with people who cover your blind spots and have skills and experiences that you don't have. And then having a vision. Cool. Thanks. And then my last question, I'll round out the recorded interview, and then we'll start to engage the other participants that are with us this afternoon. Curious, what advice do you have for students who are here and who will be watching this recording, who, like you, want to make an impact through their careers and also want to do well for themselves, who want to have a successful career, but also, want to feel like what they're doing is making an impact on the world? How do you accomplish those things?
Yeah. I fell into this work. When I was an undergraduate, I studied sociology. I went on to do what I thought was going to be a doctorate in sociology, left after my master's, and ended up doing a doctorate in education. And what I didn't realize at the time is that my interest in sociology and my interest in social inequality in particular laid an important foundation for how I see the world. And it helped me understand social problems. It helped me understand how society works. And I think one of the most important things is understanding, if you really want to address social problems, you need to understand how society works and does not work for different populations, but for everyone. It has been, if you've not had classes in social work or social psychology or sociology or any of those kind of fields that can help you begin to get that conceptual framing, theoretical framing, I think that would be enormously helpful. So I think it's important to understand how society works and how it doesn't work. I think in today's world, as we talk about issues of social justice and racial justice, it's important to understand intersectionality and the implications of intersectionality, both in terms of just human development and in terms of how inequalities work in society. And so if you don't know what I mean by intersectionality, I suggest that you look up Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a law professor at Columbia University. She's been working on this issue for 30 years. She's got a TED Talk, but she's really the expert on intersectionality. The other thing I would say is to think about the Hippocratic Oath and what that means to you. In the context of solving social problems, I think the first thing we need to do is take a pledge to ourselves to do no harm. There are a lot of important, particularly in social entrepreneur spaces, people who want to do different, exciting things, and that's wonderful. We need to be pushing the boundaries and trying things that are different. It's also important to understand that we also want to do no harm because we're working with populations who do not necessarily have access to all the resources and supports that others have access to, no fault of their own, history of discrimination, et cetera. And this country has created those situations. So know who you're working with and first take the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm. The last thing I'll say is to pay it forward. Success is a team sport. And there's no one that I've met that's been successful without people around them and by helping other people. And so just think about how you can continue to support other people. Think about the people who've helped you get to this point and going forward. And remember that success is really a team sport.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that message.